Greetings, conversationalists. Welcome. It's Erickson here across the United States of America. Delighted to have you with me today. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, we will be a little looser on phones today because we're all off the rest of the week for Thanksgiving. And that is where I want to begin the show today. It is important, I think, that we talk about Thanksgiving because the history of Western civilization is about Thanksgivings. There have been Thanksgivings in this country well before the Civil War, well before the Pilgrims set foot. You know, most famously in 1621, the Pilgrims at Plymouth got together with the local Indian tribes and celebrated a Thanksgiving. But as we know, in May of 1541, Coronado near Amarillo, Texas, had the first Thanksgiving we can document historically in the Western Hemisphere. And they had been going on for a while in Europe. It was a tradition to set aside time, goes back to the biblical era, to set aside a time each year for Thanksgiving. The French Huguenots in 1564 had a Thanksgiving at Fort Caroline, Florida. In 1607, the English joined with the local Indian tribes in Maine and had a Thanksgiving. And then in 1610 in Jamestown, Virginia, they held a date of Thanksgiving that was thereafter commemorated every year because the people in Jamestown were on hard times. There had been a drought. They were starving. And suddenly on the horizon, they saw masts and then ships rise across the horizon. And the English settlers at Berkeley Hundred, Virginia, declared that there would be a yearly, quote, and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. We get our Thanksgiving, though. There have always been Thanksgivings, but we put our finger on 1621 when 50 pilgrims joined around 100 Indians, along with Massasoit being the tribe's leader, for a 3-day-long harvest festival. And so even today, we use the cornucopias, we have turkeys. The Pilgrims had hard times when they came to the country. One of the things that a lot of people don't appreciate now, it's not lost to history, it's just not taught, is that farming in feudal societies was very socialist. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, although it should take on that. It may be a better word is communal farming. Everyone would prop up the land together. Shared harvests. What happened in Plymouth in Massachusetts was similar to that. The Pilgrims came, they had common land, farmed it in common, and the result is typically what happens in communist societies. A lot of people did not put in much labor, relying on the stronger people to do most of the work, and things didn't go well. No one had real investment in it in a communal property. And famine existed. It was a very hard time in 1621 and 1622. When they arrived, winter was setting in, and a lot of the people who arrived on the Mayflower, they stayed on the Mayflower, and like half the people died. It was a very hard time. Some of them returned and set sail to England in April 1621. They'd given up. They came here as religious dissidents, breaking with the Church of England. They arrived, and it wasn't good. William Bradford, the governor, wrote at the time, within 3 months of their landing at Plymouth Rock, quote, "Of 100 and odd persons, scarce 50 remained. And of these in ye times of most distress, there were but 6 or 7 sound persons who to their great commendation, to be it spoken, spared no pains night or day, but with abundance of toil and hazard of their own health. That all ye homely and necessary offices which dainty and queasy stomachs cannot endure to hear named, and all this willingly and cheerfully, showing therein their true love unto their friends and brethren. A rare example of worth to be remembered. So of 100 some odd people, 50 remained and only 6 or 7 were competent, and they did all the work. One half of the crew of the Mayflower, including many of their officers, boatswains, gunners, quartermasters, the cook, and others, perished before they could turn around in April of 1621. William Bradford documented what happened in the Great Turnaround. In the first year or so, they planted in common. The Indians took mercy on them and helped, and they nearly starved. But then in 1623, for their annual Thanksgiving festival, they had an overabundance of food. Any general want or famine hath not been among us since to this day, Governor Bradford wrote in his journal in 1623. Why? Well, Governor Bradford, quote, assigned to every family a parcel of land according to the proportion of their number for that end, only for present use, and ranged all boys and youth under some family. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious. So as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means, yet governor or any other use, and saved him a great deal of trouble and gave far better content. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to set corn, which before would allege weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been through great tyranny and oppression. In other words, what Governor Bradford was writing is that in 1623, instead of planting in common, he gave to each family a plot of land and told that family the land was assigned based on the number of children and husband and wife, and said, you're going to plant this land for your family. And any you have left can be traded with other families. And guess what happened? Every family knew it was either going to work or die. And so every family wound up planting. And where women in the past and children would complain that it was oppression to make them work the fields, would now willingly go work to take care of their own families. Bradford wrote, the experience that was had in this common course and condition tried sundry years, and that amongst godly and sober men may well evince the vanity of that conceit of Plato and other ancients, that ye taking away of property and bringing into a commonwealth would make them happy and flourish, and if they were wiser than God. For this community, so far as it was found to breed much confusion and discontent, and retard much employment that would have been to their benefit and comfort. For ye young men that were most able and fit for labor and service did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. The strong, or man of parts, had no more in division of victuals and cloth than he. This was weak and not able to do a quarter, ye other could, thought it was injustice. In other words, when you made them work in common for each other, they claimed oppression, and it bred discontent because they thought they were having to work for other people instead of themselves. So instead, in 1623, William Bradford ordered each man to plant for his own family, giving them a plot of land sufficient to do so, and they flourished. And then in 1624, they did something else. When it came time for the spring planting of 1624, the Pilgrims under Governor Bradford did, this is what he wrote in his journal, I must speak of their planting this year. They having found ye benefit of their last year's harvest, and setting corn for their particular, having thereby with a great deal of patience overcome hunger and famine. that they might increase their tillage to better advantage, they made suit to the governor to have some portion of land given them for continuance and not by yearly allotment. For by that means, that which ye more industrious had brought into good condition 1 year came to leave it yet next. And often another might enjoy it. So as the dressings of their land were the more slighted over into less profit. Which being well considered, their request was granted. To every person was given only 1 acre of land to them and theirs, and nary town as might be, and they had no more till 7 years were expired. In other words, they went from giving the allotment in 2023 where they put work into the land, and the next year in 2024 it could go to someone else, and they came to William Bradford and said, hey, we put all the work into our acre of land, let us keep our acre of land, instead of every year doing a lottery to assign the land. And so private property became a thing on this continent in 1624, when William Bradford said, instead of giving people a plot of land and then taking it back at the end of the year and reassigning it the next year, every family would be given this acre of land to keep in perpetuity for them to tend and till to grow for their family. And guess what? By 1626, Governor Bradford told us, it pleased the Lord to give the plantation peace and health and contented minds, and so to bless their labors, as they had come sufficient with other food. Neither ever had they any supply of food but what they first brought with them. After harvest this year, they sent out a boatload of corn, 40 or 50 leagues, to eastward up a river called the Kennebec. God preserved them and gave them good cess, and they brought home beaver and fur and more. They had so much food, they started trading with the Indians and then others who moved. The overabundance of individual private property rights got the Pilgrims from starving every year to plentiful and bountiful, to the point that they could trade and import and export. And then what happened? Famine persisted in England. Famine persisted in England because in England they still farmed in common. It was the general practice for another 100 years. Not until the second decade of the 1700s did setting crops for their own purpose begin to be accepted in England. Why did it begin to be accepted in England? Because word came back from the colonies that the Pilgrims, who they all thought would go and starve to death, learned that if you divide up land for families, give the families the land and tell them to take care of their families on the land, they would plant an overabundance and begin to trade. And it still took 100 years for that lesson to sink back into England. It was the colonists who saved England from starving, because the colonists discovered private property rights. And we've been celebrating Thanksgiving ever since. Don't forget, the celebration of American Thanksgiving is intertwined with the idea of private property rights. It was the very basis by which the Pilgrims survived and spread their lessons to the other English colonists, who then moved in to the colonial land, and they told them, make each person farm for him and his family and give him a plot of land that will be his in perpetuity, and you will not have famine. And they did not have famine, because they had private property. And the families in abundance were able to trade with those whose crops failed, and everyone took care of everyone that way by first taking care of themselves. And for that, we should all be thankful. I've been invited multiple times to be on a CNN show that's filmed in New York. It's 10 p.m. Abby Phillips's show, and I've turned them down politely, but I don't really want to be on the show. It's like two Republicans, one of whom is conservative, one of whom typically isn't. Sometimes they are. The last night was Jim Garrity and Scott Jennings. They're both pretty conservative. But then you're surrounded by a bunch of people on the left, including the anchor moderator of the discussion, who tends to be clueless. This is where Ryan Gadowski got banned for making a joke about Mehdi Hassan's pager going off. Ryan Gadowski had previously made a comment about the Ferguson effect, and everyone on the show was aghast at the idea of the Ferguson effect, had never heard of it, called it mythology. Abby Phillips, the anchor, was also shocked, had no idea what he was talking about, and turns out she had written about the Ferguson effect when she was a reporter of the Washington Post. I'm dumbfounded by the whole show. But there was an exchange last night because Elon Musk is threatening to buy MSNBC. That's right. He's threatening to buy MSNBC, which would be hilarious. Comcast wants to get rid of it. Too much of a headache. Not making any money. Y'all can't understand. So let me just put this in perspective for you. If you watch cable news, 70+% of people who watch cable news watch Fox News. About 12% watch MSNBC and 11% watch CNN, and the rest watch Newsmax, News Nation, OAN, and the like. Bloomberg, CNBC. Like 70% of people who watch cable news are watching Fox News. MSNBC, its audience skews coastal and old. CNN actually has a broader pool of people who watch. It's just not a lot of people who watch. But CNN, the age range of people who watch CNN is much broader than the age range of people who watch MSNBC. But you watch this CNN show, that they're just having a not normal situation about Elon Musk and Twitter. They're upset with Twitter. And the gist of the argument and concern from the left is that they don't control it, therefore it's bad. Listen to this exchange on CNN last night.
Is that platforms are not regulated right now, which gives them carte blanche to whatever they want right now. Elon is not someone who likes to be regulated. And so to buy MSN, he would go under some federal regulations.
Who's regulating CNN right now?
The FCC.
We're not a broadcast. It's cable.
Now, I'm going to pause. That's my buddy Jim Garrity from National Review. Who's regulating CNN? The look of just who the hell are you to question me on these two women's faces when he points that out. So cable news is not regulated over the airwaves because it's not the airwaves. You can go on a cable news channel and utter profanity, and you can't get in trouble with the FCC. You do it on ABC, CBS, or NBC, you're going to get in trouble. The Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction, things like that. The fact that they didn't know is a big red flag for everything that comes thereafter in this conversation.
I don't really think cable stations are under the same regulatory structure that broadcast is.
It's definitely regulated more than than Facebook and
there's
Twitter.
Still, what she's saying is that there's still a litmus test of journalism that you have to pass. You can't come on TV and just make up things and say things.
Wait. Notice now that they're doing the three-card Monty. They're shuffling, trying to distract. They start with they're not regulated by the FCC. First, they claim regulation by the FCC. Then they're exposed as not. They're like, well, you can't just come on TV and make stuff up. They do it all the time.
X. Please don't give me the eyebrow furrow as if you don't know what I'm talking about. It happens often on X. I can go and say the color is blue, and I will be met with so many disrespectful remarks. No one's regulating the N-word. No one's regulating the criticism. No one is regulating how people are treated.
How much government regulation of the First Amendment are you for?
Let me tell you something. If I came on here and I just started calling you all kind of names, do you think the bosses would let me continue to do that?
I mean, it happens to me occasionally. I don't know if you watch
it doesn't happen to you, but it doesn't happen for me, and I know that I wouldn't be able to do that. There's a level of professionalism in what we do here because we are journalists and we adhere to something, at least morally. And there is no moral compass on this thing called. You're also
okay. The arrogance to say we are journalists, we have some sort of moral ethic. But again, pay attention to the line of argument from these idiots, and they are idiots. These are idiot people. They go from the FCC regulates CNN, which it doesn't. And when that's pointed out, they say, well, there's regulation here that's not on Twitter. We couldn't come here and say something you can say on Twitter because the bosses wouldn't allow it. The bosses are not the government. And for the record, you can go on CNN and compare Donald Trump's supporters to Nazis and get away with it. It happens all the time. When I was at CNN, I knew there were things I couldn't say that people on the left absolutely could say and get away with it, because it's not that there's regulation, it's that there's a double standard. But these geniuses, when confronted with the fact that CNN is not regulated by the FCC, are suddenly, well, but we can say anything. Well, yes, the internet's kind of the Wild West. To Scott Jennings' question, you will note she could not answer it. How much regulation of the First Amendment do you want? She tried to dodge it. But then there was this exchange with the same thing where Scott Jennings points out that actually Twitter's pretty fair and balanced.
Also, I heard what you're saying about X. I saw a survey this week. It's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott,
of any platform.
stop. It's too early. I just sat down. I've only been here for 2 minutes. You cannot continue to say
the show, but
you cannot say that.
So
So that's the case. Who's the source of that?
What I find, we reported it on this network.
It's not accurate, and you know it.
Okay. The anchor said, who reported that? Who reported that? Who reported that? It's not accurate. That is what the anchor on the CNN show says. Who reported that? And the other journalist who makes a big deal about being a journalist says that's not accurate. So who reported that Twitter's the most fair and balanced social media network? Why, that would be no one other than Harry Inton at CNN.
Look at this. The party ID among those who regularly use X/Twitter for news. Back in 2022, 65% of those who regularly use Twitter/X for news were Democrats. Just 31% were Republicans. Look at where we are today. Just a completely different picture. Now it's basically split between Democrats at 48%, Republicans at 47%. And what I should note, Mr. Berman, is this new overall makeup matches the overall electorate far better.
What? Therein lies the problem. Again, I got to go back to this because I think this is so important. This is Scott Jennings' clip. You're going to hear the anchor say, who reported that? Keep in mind, CNN itself reported it.
Also, I heard what you're saying about X. I saw a survey this week. It's now the most ideologically balanced user platform.
Scott, stop. It's too early. I just sat down. I've only been here for 2 minutes. You cannot continue to say that. You cannot say that. So that's the case. Who's the source?
And that's the anchor saying, who was that source? Who was that source? CNN was the source. And Pew Research. And that's the problem. Notice their reaction. It's not that they can't believe the data. It's that they're not in charge. They're not in charge, and therein lies the problem. And this is why they're not going to be able to learn lessons from what happened in November, because they're not in charge. They're simply not in charge. They want a social media outlet that the left controls. That's why they've all gone to Blue Sky. I got an account on Blue Sky when it first started. I explicitly chose not to mention politics at all. And just by virtue of my existence on the platform was getting hate from progressives. How dare you come here? I was tweeting on Blue Sky, whatever you would call it on Blue Sky, posting about cooking, and they would attack me. And that's the benefit of this CNN show. I don't want to be a part of this hive mind nonsense on CNN, but this shows you the arrogance of the journalistic community. And last night really exposed it. They can't accept the fact that the same people at CNN telling them polling-driven data will show them polling-driven data that shows Twitter is now balanced. 48% Democrat, 47% Republican, exactly the way the electorate is. Twitter now looks like the American electorate, and they're like, this can't be. It certainly can't be, because people are allowed to say terrible things that I disagree with on Twitter. People are allowed to say things I don't think are true on Twitter. Just because you don't think it's true doesn't mean it's not true. Holy moly, these people. And even the anchor had not heard about the ideological balance on Twitter. Demanded to know from Scott Jennings, your source. The source is CNN. They don't like it because it is balanced. That's why they don't like Fox News. Do you know, when I was at CNN, I could do one-on-one interviews. When I was at Fox News, I was never allowed to do a one-on-one interview. It always had to be with someone from the other side to be balanced. I actually liked the one-on-one interviews better, not because I don't want someone challenging me, because I like it when the reporters challenge me. Like I do interviews with Leland Vittert a lot on News Nation. Great news. It's actually become the news channel. In fact, I've got it on the studio right now. Way more fair, middle of the road, just news-based, not Trump-obsessed than anybody else. And when I go on with Leland Vittert, like last night, he challenged me, played devil's advocate the whole time. And when the Democrat came on after me, did the exact same thing. It wasn't the Democrat and me being put into a false fight where we're supposed to yell at each other and challenge each other. No, it was a substantive conversation where he probed me as hard as he probed the other guy on the weaknesses of our argument, and it worked. It makes you better. These people at CNN, though, if they're not in charge, they believe it's got to be it's some right-wing lie, and that's part of the problem here. Is they don't like being confronted with not just alternate views, but also facts that challenge their worldview. So Scott Jennings throws at them the fact that now Twitter is, according to Pew Research, which is widely respected by everyone, Pew Research shows it is an ideologically balanced group of people on Twitter, and they have a meltdown at CNN with even the anchor demanding to know the source, incredulous that this could be the case. No, you people on the left just don't like it when you're not in charge. That's why you have to discredit the Senate when you don't run the Senate. It's why you have to discredit the Supreme Court because you don't control the Supreme Court. It's why you got to discredit the Electoral College when you don't control the Electoral College. It's why you got to discredit any institution you don't control. And now you don't control Twitter. You're tied in ideological makeup with people in Twitter, and so you must begin to destroy Twitter because you don't control it. It's all about the power and all about who controls what. And for the left, if they don't control it, it's bad. They don't want to be challenged. By the way, you know, you can set yourself up on Twitter so you don't have to see the people who challenge you. You don't have to see the people who insult you. You don't have to see the people who troll you. They don't want those people to exist is the problem. And when Scott Jennings and Jim Garrity inform them they're wrong, they simply can't handle it. It's not because they were women, it's because they were progressives. Just needling some of you, but seriously, it's because they were progressives. And they really have closed their minds to any sort of data that challenges their worldview. The epistemic closure of the progressive mind. They can't understand that there are institutions out there that are fair and balanced that they don't control because they believe the only fair institutions are the ones that they are completely in charge of, and they can silence anyone who dares dissent. And that's not fair and balanced. It's just a power play by the left. Fellow Americans, it's wonderful to have you with me today. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. It's Erick Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, if you want to be on the show today, we're going to treat it somewhat as an open line Friday. It's 877-973-7425. Are any of you going to the Texas A&M game? This Saturday, the most expensive regular season football game on record, college or NFL. All those Texans want to go watch this intrastate rivalry. The current get-in is $741, but the average ticket price, $1,079 to see Texas and Texas A&M this Saturday. I got to tell you, I love college football, and this year, college football has been wild. It's been vastly more entertaining. The upsets, I mean, Vandy beating Alabama, LSU beating Vandy, which means LSU is better than Alabama, Georgia beating Texas, and then losing to Ole Miss. Maybe one day they'll get a reliable quarterback at Georgia. I don't know. It just, I mean, Georgia is not what I was expecting, and then poor old LSU, they beat Vandy, and the LSU fans at the end of the game after winning against Vanderbilt are chanting to fire their coach who's not a great coach. He's just, I'm not a big fan of his. Nobody in Louisiana is. They all want him gone. That fake Cajun accent in his intro video just ruined him. It's been all downhill from there. College football's just been wild this year. And now this. I'm actually going to the Chargers-Hawks game, or Falcons game. The Hawks are basketball. Falcon Chargers game this weekend with some friends. Got tickets to go to that. I've never, don't hold it against me, those of you in Atlanta, I've never been a big Falcons fan. I grew up in Louisiana, so the Saints were who I rooted for. I owned the Green Bay Packers. Those tend to be the teams I root for, but I like the Chargers. And some of their players are listeners and got invited to go to the game. So I'm going to go see them this weekend. But I've never been to a Georgia game, and I need to go. The governor of Georgia has now twice invited me to go to games, and I've been out of town both times and couldn't go, but I need to go to a Georgia game. I've been to an LSU game, of course. Those are the best. Although I got to say, tailgating at Ole Miss is probably the greatest sporting event. Nonetheless, I digress. I'm not spending that much money. You Texas and Texas A&M people, y'all go beat each other up on the field, wear each other out, exhaust each other, injure each other. I want the stars of the teams to be taken out before they can move further into the season. I shouldn't say that. All right. Have a happy Thanksgiving watching lots of football. We need to move on. I want to call your attention to a couple of stories because it's relevant, and it goes back to the prior story that we talked about last hour on CNN and the progressive journalists at CNN being shocked at and refusing to believe the data that Twitter, since Elon Musk took it and all the liberals left, is now actually the most balanced, politically balanced social media platform out there. 48% identify as Democrats, 47% identify as Republicans. And it's related to a story that seems to be completely unrelated. Here's the headline from the New York Times. Automakers to Trump. Please require us to sell electric vehicles. 3 of the nation's largest automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, are strategizing with other car manufacturers on how to make a delicate request of President-elect Donald Trump. Don't scrap the federal regulations that compel the industry to sell electric vehicles. The conversation would require diplomatic finesse. Mr. Trump has railed against the EV rules, which strictly limit the amount of tailpipe pollution while also ramping up fuel economy standards. They are designed to get car makers to produce more electric vehicles and have been a cornerstone of President Biden's fight against climate change. Mr. Trump sees them differently. He has falsely said the rules amount to a Democratic mandate that would prevent Americans from buying the gasoline-powered cars of their choice. That's not false. That's true. So at the very beginning here, 3 paragraphs in, the New York Times is already lying with the word falsely. Mr. Trump still holds grievances about some of the automakers whom he views as having betrayed him because during his first term, they supported Obama-era auto emissions rules. In fact, most automakers don't love the more stringent rules Mr. Biden put in place, but they've already invested billions in a transition to electric vehicles. And fear of Mr. Trump made an abrupt change as he has promised, they could be undercut by automakers who sell cheaper gas-powered cars. They argue it would harm an industry that's the backbone of American manufacturing and employs 1.1 million people. So you've already got one major lie in here. Donald Trump falsely said the rules amount to a Democratic mandate that would prevent Americans from buying the gasoline-powered cars of choice. It's actually true. It is a Democratic mandate that will prevent people from buying the gasoline cars of their choice. Now, this is from Tom Catenacci at the Washington Free Beacon in response to this New York Times story. The 3 largest American automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, are, according to the New York Times, planning a coordinated lobbying push to convince President-elect Donald Trump to maintain a suite of climate rules forcing electric vehicle purchases. The Thursday report, titled Automakers to Trump, Please Require Us to Sell Electric Vehicles, cites unnamed lobbyists and officials from several car companies who say manufacturers want Trump to keep the Biden administration's regulations for electric vehicle purchases. But at least one of the referenced automakers, Stellantis, is pushing back on the Times reporting. Beyond that, a letter from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, the nation's lead auto industry group, sent to Trump on November 12th and obtained by the Washington Free Beacon, indicates that climate rules pushing electric vehicles are among the major headwinds facing the industry. A spokesman for Stellantis told the Free Beacon the company is not pushing to preserve EV mandates. Quote, the New York Times story characterizing Stellantis as preferring to lobby the incoming administration to preserve mandates is not accurate. Stellantis was not among the lobbyists and officials from several car companies the story cites. In fact, Stellantis' CEO has repeatedly said the company is uniquely well positioned to adapt to any policy changes President-elect Trump might make because its multi-energy platforms can easily flex to accommodate a wide range of powertrain options from internal combustion to full battery electric. Ford and General Motors executives said they would also prepare for market changes and respond to consumer demand. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation went further, urging Donald Trump to roll back the standards. Now, this is the thing. The big three, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, they're part of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. So you have the Car Manufacturers Alliance and Stellantis directly saying the New York Times story isn't true. And the New York Times essentially saying the big three automakers want us to keep all these onerous regulations. They're lying. They lied in the third paragraph, how they characterized Trump saying something they said was false when it's actually true. They're lying to preserve power. Now, this gets to the liberals at Target. Yeah, I realize, unrelated. But there's a Wall Street Journal story today. The headline, Target slide from cheap chic to dull chore. Shoppers are falling out of love with Target. Customers have long bragged about their cheap chic Target purchases. Now many are griping about items missing on shelves, long checkout lines, and products locked up to prevent theft. Others say they're shopping at the chain less because they feel groceries are cheaper elsewhere or there's a lack of exciting items. Some are still upset about a Pride Month collection in 2023 that they felt went too far. Now, it's that last one, the Pride Month collection. Let me jump through the link. This is from August of 2023. Target, much like Bud Light, is stung by culture wars. Target, much like the brewer of Bud Light, discovered the cost of getting caught in the middle of hot-button social issues in a politically divided United States. Sales at both businesses suffered over marketing efforts that backfired and caused shoppers on both sides of the topic to call for boycotts. Anheuser-Busch came under fire for a social media promotion with a transgender influencer. Target was criticized for store displays of merchandise for Pride Month that included gender-neutral swimsuits. Then each company's response angered supporters. Now, this is very important because Target's chief executive officer has long denied that Target's aggressive pushing of Pride Month did anything. Remember, years ago, Target was one of the very first stores in the country to say they would allow men into women's restrooms. And that began a boycott, and to this day, Target denies that had an impact. Yet you know it had an impact because Target expanded the number of unisex bathrooms in their stores. I'm sorry, but when you're willing to invest a whole lot of money into unisex bathrooms after a backlash, and you're going to say that backlash did nothing, affected nothing, and did not influence you, you're lying. In the same way, they're overabundant, in-your-face pride stuff with the gender-neutral swimsuits and, for kids, and it was just gross. And a pro-Satan designer designing stuff for him last year, it caused a backlash. And again, Target's like, no, that has nothing to do with it. And other news outlets, not the Wall Street Journal, ran stories and said, no, Target has seen no effect from this boycott. It wasn't true. Time and time again, the media lies to preserve its narrative. Like, for example, over the weekend, Bad guys in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai murdered an Israeli rabbi. The New York Times headline is Israeli rabbi gone missing, dead. No, he was murdered by Iranian sympathizers. They didn't want to give you the full story. So here we have again, time and time again, the media refusing to give you accurate information in large part because that information disagrees with the left-wing narrative. They just can't process that they've lost the culture on these issues. And they have to build this Potemkin village of narratives that are empty. They have lost the American public. The progressives in charge of Target have lied. The progressives in charge of the New York Times, they lie. The progressives in the media lie. And they don't like Twitter, not because Twitter is conservative or Twitter allows lies. It's because Twitter is where people can now so easily go and combat the lies with truth. Twitter is where you can expose the lies. And it happens every day and is quite effective at popping the bubble of the left-wing narrative. For so long, progressives controlled every narrative. They had ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and the newspaper. Then Fox News came along and shattered it, and more people started watching Fox, and they have spent years trying to discredit Fox News and drive Fox News out of business. Then along comes Elon Musk, who buys Twitter, and guess what they're doing there too? Elon Musk and Twitter shatters their narratives, and now they're furious about that as well. They don't like Fox. They don't like Twitter. They don't have to play along with it. What they don't like is that they can't control it. They don't like it because they're not in charge of it, and their lies are getting exposed. The left's narratives mountain a throne of lies, trying to preserve their power. I have an idea for progressives. If you want to earn the trust of the American people again, maybe stop lying to them. Maybe acknowledge reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. And too many on the left would rather force us to change our words and be at war with the English language to change reality than actually, well, accept reality as it is and accommodate people where they are. The left does not want to do that, and they're still using media institutions to try to spread lies instead of dealing with Again, this is one of those things where people on the right said this was happening, and our news media lied to us and denied it to cover for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. This speaks for itself. Again, this is CBS News, New York.
Well, growing concern among the NYPD over Venezuelan gang activity across the cities. Police believe some gang members are recruiting children living in migrant shelters.
As Jennifer Bisram reports, the gang has blended in with asylum seekers who began arriving here in 2022.
Once they commit their crimes, they go back to the migrant community where they assimilate themselves with people that are actually here obeying the laws.
The NYPD is cracking down on Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang they say is living in the shelter system and recruiting children.
We have 39 members of TDA that have been identified, and we have an additional 4 members that have been identified of a subgroup called the Little Devils of 42nd Street.
42nd Street.
Yeah, those are much younger kids.
And those are just the members police have been able to identify.
We have no fingerprints on file for them. We have no photographs on file for them. We have no prior criminal history on them. They swap out their IDs. We have no way of tracking or knowing who they are when they enter the country.
The NYPD's chief of detectives says undocumented criminals as young as 11 years old are carrying out retail robberies and committing crimes on scooters, snatching people's jewelry, watches, and cell phones at gunpoint and knife point. Over 300 incidents last year, more than 800 so far this year. They've brazenly shot at police officers, too.
When we do make arrests and we're able to charge them on 4, 5, 6 incidents, when they go before a judge in New York City and their arrest record is run, they show no prior criminal history. They're released on their own recognizance.
That's New York City. Because of progressive policies in New York City. Remember, the Erick Adams is attacked for complaining about out-of-control illegal immigration in New York City, and the judges and the DAs let him out of prison. That's what's happening because of progressive policies, and it's what the media said wasn't true. Now, let me tell you what's true as well. You go to EdenPureDeals.com, you put in Erick3 as your discount code. You can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms for less than $200, and you save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. They not only wipe out odors, and I'm talking, any odor you throw at it, the spoiled shrimp odor, a dirty diaper odor, smoke odors in a rental car, they wipe it out. You can plug it into your car with a USB outlet. You can plug it directly into the wall. It even now wipes out 99.9% of bacteria and viruses. It generates plasma, wipes them out, gets rid of pet dander, pollen, dust, you name it, packs a wallop, and you can hold it in your hand. I keep one in my travel bag. You can get 3 of them and save $200. You go to EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is Erick3, ERICK3. You get the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and you start cleaning the air. You get one for upstairs, one for downstairs, one in your basement, or your travel bag, or your RV, or your car, wherever you need them. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code again, ERICK3, Erick3 at EdenPureDeals.com. News out of the gate here. Welcome. It's Erick Erickson here. We've got some breaking news. Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to a ceasefire. It will start at sunup Wednesday morning their time. So in a few hours from now, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, which is good. Now, I wasn't going to do this here, but I'm going to do this here because I think it's important. On my mind, y'all, it has been a heck of a year. And first of all, I want you all to know how very thankful I am for all of you. In my flagship market in Atlanta, I have been the #1 radio program, music or talk. They call it the demo. People who listen 25 to 54, that's what advertisers care about. I've been #1, and I've got several other program directors reached out to me from their markets. They've put me on and #1 either overall or #1 with men. And in talk radio, #1 with men is a big thing. And so, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you, and thank you to the program directors, and thank you to the companies that have taken a chance on the show this year. And I'm an awkward, I lost a big station because the market manager of that station decided I wasn't willing to be deferential enough and non-critical of Donald Trump. I criticize everyone, including Trump. And he didn't like it and decided to axe the show. And I licked that wound a little bit. But at the same time, by just telling you what I think and being who I am and not trying to BS you or just tell you what I want to hear, the show is done incredibly well. Related to that to a degree, I want you to commit, please, and it's going to be easier for y'all to do than for progressives to do. Don't talk politics at Thanksgiving, particularly with family who may disagree with you. That's something that, I find this in particular, it's always progressives. I don't recall ever seeing anywhere on any conservative site advice to be divisive at Thanksgiving. But every year at Thanksgiving, there's some progressive site somewhere that insists you should either be in your relatives' faces about politics, or you should avoid like the plague anyone who disagrees with you over politics. You should not allow people to celebrate Thanksgiving with you if you disagree with them politically. And I'm sorry, but life is too short for you to divide your family based on politics. And here's the thing. A lot of the people who have divided their lives on politics, they worship politics. Politics is their religion. I don't think that's a coincidence either. I grew up overseas in the Middle East. I had friends who were Muslims. I had friends who were Hindu. I had friends who were Buddhist. had friends who were Christian. I had friends who were secular, atheists. Across the spectrum, I had friends. I'm used to being able to hang out with people who disagree, and you just avoid the hot topics. You don't talk religion, you don't talk politics. Here I am doing a radio show where I talk religion and politics. And by the way, I got to say, y'all would be amazed at the number of people in radio who insist, I got to stop talking about faith and religion on this radio show. And then I do a live event. You pick the live event, you pick the venue anywhere in the country. And all the listeners come up, they appreciate that I do. It's a particular quirk in radio. They're the ones upset with it. The listeners actually aren't. But this goes to the whole political frame of people who are so obsessed with politics, and in their obsession with politics, they've turned politics into religion. And they don't want to associate with the heretics. They don't want to associate with the apostates. They don't want to associate with the people who see the world differently from them. And it is, in particular, a unique quirk of the political left, because on the political left, they have substituted God for government, and politics has become their religion. Instead of going to church on Sunday, they go to protest. Instead of giving a tithe to a church, they give money to Planned Parenthood. Instead of singing hymns, they sing songs of the resistance. It's become religious for them. And so just as you want to go to a church that shares your denominational inklings, like I God bless you if you're Catholic, I don't want to go to a Catholic church. I'm grew up Southern Baptist, I'm Presbyterian. I want to go to a Protestant church, preferably not United Methodist Church. Those people lost their minds. Go to a PCA church, go to a Baptist church. Go to a non-denominational strip mall church, which is generally code for Southern Baptist, but with bourbon. But if I got to go to a Catholic church because there are other churches around, I'd go to a Catholic church. But with progressives, they can't go to their own family Thanksgiving if Uncle Bob voted for Donald Trump. And that's a damning indictment on them. But also, Uncle Bob, there's no reason for you to gloat at Thanksgiving. We've entered a wild phenomenon in this country where we not just have sore losers, we have sore winners as well. And there are a lot of people who they can't just win. They need to be in your face about their win. There's no grace anymore. And this is, we've crossed the Rubicon between the believer and the non-believer. And so many people who call themselves Christians in this country now, they're really not. You know, if you go back to the Old Testament, there's this laundry list of things that God tells the Israelites to not do. Eat shellfish. You know, the God of all creation deprived the Jews of shrimp. I don't know why, but it saved the shrimp for the rest of us. But he told them, don't mix fabric clothing. You don't wear mixed fabric clothing. Don't get tattoos. The tattoo one is funny to me, and let me just dwell on this one for a moment with you. It is hard to find a youth pastor in America these days who doesn't have a tattoo and wears flannel. With the Jews, God said, you don't get tattoos. Now, why? The reason was because, and this is some speculation on my part, but educated speculation, having gone to seminary, all the other tribes had tattoos. In fact, a tattoo is a cultural norm in tribes. Go to South America, study ancient American Indian culture, study ancient European culture and tribalism, and in Africa, tattoos are a thing. Go to the Middle East, rewind 4,000 years ago, tattoos were symbolic. You get a sense that the Jews were told to dress differently, act differently, and live differently, and it set them apart. You could identify a Jew from the other people around them visually, distinctly. These people don't have tattoos. They must be Jews. These people are circumcised. They must be tattoos. These people don't wear mixed fabric clothing. They must have tattoos. These people have food laws. Now remember, this is well before Islam. And it was the Jewish people who were given a set of laws compared to other countries, other nations, other religions, other tribes. And they had food laws, they had customary laws, and it had to do with purity and cleanliness. And it set them apart. They were visually distinct. So you fast forward to the New Testament. And those cleanliness and purity laws go by the wayside. I call them shibboleths of the damned. Progressives will throw them in your face. You eat shellfish and wear mixed fabric clothing. You call yourself a Christian? Yes, because I'm a Christian. I'm not an ancient Israelite. There's a difference. When people bring that up, you know they're probably going to hell because they're really ignorant about Christianity. But what happened? What happened? There is a method to my madness here. Just follow along with me. Suddenly, you could eat what you wanted to eat. I still think blood, because that was Noahic. You shouldn't, but that's a theological hill for me to die on, not you. But you can wear mixed fabric clothing. You can eat shellfish. You can get tattoos. And how now does the Christian set himself apart? By his behavior. See, the Israelites were visually distinct from everyone around them. The Christian is culturally distinct from everyone around him. Why? The Christian has joy where others have none. The Christians were persecuted by the Romans because they would go to the Abori. The Abori was the slang for the Roman dump. And the children that the Romans didn't want would go to the Abori. I bet you know what word is derived from the Abori. They wanted to leave the kids they didn't want on the trash heap. They'd dump them on the Abori. They would abort the kids. And the Christians would go rescue them and raise them as their own. Some of them deformed kids. Some of them with birth defects. They'd raise them. They were known by their love. They were known for their distinctive cultural practices of going where others dared go. Because the Christians believed that not a hair would be taken from their head until God willed it. Others would flee from areas of disease. The Christians would go in and tend to the sick. These weird people. Christians have stood apart as countercultural. So you got Uncle Bob now, who's a Trump guy, who knows little Sally with her they, them pronouns is coming for Thanksgiving, and he's going to wear his MAGA shirt and his MAGA cap, and he's going to rub in that Donald Trump won. It's not very Christian of Uncle Bob. He doesn't care, though, because he doesn't go to church on Sunday. He just calls himself Christian as an ethnic identifier. Uncle Bob should probably be a better Christian. It doesn't mean you got to embrace Sally and use her pronouns. It just means don't be a jerk at the dinner table. Don't be a jerk. You won, be humble. Christians, ultimately, is their defining characteristic, in addition to their love and joy, is their humility. They're humble people. They're not braggadocious in your face at the dinner table because the guy they voted for won. And here's the funny thing that the Bible tells us. Pay attention, Uncle Bob. You want to gloat to Sally and her they, them pronouns and her purple hair. You're not gloating actually makes Sally more mad. So the Bible tells us being kind to people like that heaps burning coals on their head. Your willingness to not gloat, in addition to giving everyone a more peaceful Thanksgiving, actually makes Sally more mad when she leaves because she wanted the fight. She was prepared. She has things she's prepared to tell you, and you've deprived her of that opportunity to mouth off at the table. Those of you on the left, give it up. You lost the election. There's going to be an election in 2 years. You'll probably win it. It's the way the midterms work. Calm down. The end of America is not here, despite what you think. And those of you on the right, be humble, be happy, be joyful. And joy is different from happiness because you can be sad and still have joy. You can be sad, you can be mournful, and you can still have joy. And you should be set apart by your joy. This Thanksgiving, use this as an opportunity. As the media wants you divided and the left wants everybody divided, as everybody wants everybody at each other's throat, as China and Russia want Americans fighting Americans, so we're divided and they can be united together, unite. Be thankful. There are people out there who their families can't get together and yours can. Be thankful. Be thankful for your blessings. Whether you like the way the election came out or not, I got to tell you, be thankful for this country. Be thankful for the people of this country. Be thankful for the founders of this country. Be thankful. Be joyful. Be thankful. Be united. Don't go out of your way to divide yourself. And if you're one of those people who is listening to me because you hate listening, and you're listening to Joy Reid telling you don't celebrate Thanksgiving with people who disagree with you, I'm telling you celebrate Thanksgiving with people who disagree with you and find ways to have pleasant conversation. And in that pleasant conversation, find ways to build bridges because it'll make you a better person. The problem is so many of these people on the left already think they're better people, and they're not. They're just like you and me, sinners. They just don't recognize sin. Be joyful. Be thankful. Be together this holiday season. Now, let me tell you about my bank I'm thankful for, Old Glory Bank. I was an advertiser. I was a user of Old Glory Bank before I was an advertiser of them. I actually begged them to advertise on the show because I wanted to tell people about them and get paid to do it a little bit. I mean, I'd tell you about them anyway. They're a fantastic bank. They are literally my bank. I have my checking account with them. I have my savings account with them. Even though they're an online bank, I can deposit cash in Old Glory Bank. They've got 88,000 retail locations around the country that use an innovation on their app where you generate a QR code. The CVS by my house, I've done this before. After I won big in Las Vegas, I went, generated the QR code, the cashier scanned it, I gave her the money, she put it in the cash register, and it got credited to my account. I don't know how. It's like magic, but it works. Old Glory Bank. If you're a business, you can do business checking with Old Glory Bank. You can do business loans. You can do mortgages, home loans, car loans, whatever you need. They're a real bank. They even do CDs and got great interest rates. OldGloryBank.com. You can fill out the form online and get your account set up right online. They'll mail you their very cool, well-designed debit card. OldGloryBank.com. OldGloryBank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Yeah. It is. Okay, so Tammy, listen, first, thanks for the phone call. And for those of you who don't understand Tammy's reference at the end, so Forsyth County, Georgia, is north of Atlanta, and it was a fairly rural ag community and just exploded in the last 20 years. It just is booming now. So many people and so much traffic, and it's a wonderful area with a whole lot of wonderful people. Now, we've done the Thanksgiving. I got to move on because I want to play for you something. Seb Gorka, he's blocked me on social media. I've never been a big fan of his. He was a national security guy, got a radio show, and has left to go into the Trump administration, giving up radio. And Seb Gorka he was doing an interview about Ukraine. I'm going to pause before I get to his audio. Here's something that I've been saying to you for a while. The Biden administration foreign policy is built around fantasy. And the fantasy that the Biden administration has peddled for so long is that if the United States would just get out of the way, we can have peace in the world. And it derives from the Barack Obama sense of redefining American foreign policy so that we are just one of 198 countries. We're no better than the others. So we exercise some false humility to claim that everybody is equal when they're not. And we're going to tie everything to human rights like Jimmy Carter did. It's just been a disastrous foreign policy. It was a disastrous foreign policy when Jimmy Carter tried it. It's a disastrous foreign policy now. And one of the things the Biden administration has done that people on the left and people in the press cannot comprehend is he has actually made the situation in Ukraine worse. The situation in Ukraine is cascading towards World War III in large part because Joe Biden decided to be the Neville Chamberlain of Ukraine. What did Joe Biden do to make it bad? Joe Biden told Ukraine he would give them armaments that he never delivered. Joe Biden told other nations not to give Ukraine armaments they wanted. Joe Biden gave Ukraine armaments that it wanted and then said, you're not allowed to use them. Joe Biden dithered and dragged his feet constantly. He dragged things out. He blames Congress every time, and it's just not true. Members of Congress on the Republican side who very much support Ukraine have vented their frustrations to me for a very long time. that Joe Biden is all talk and no action when it comes to Ukraine. And the result is that the Russians knew that they could cross every red line that Joe Biden set because Joe Biden was not going to enforce any red lines. And now where has it led us? To having North Koreans camped out on the border with Ukraine, ready to cross the border. What is the solution to this? The solution to this is to tell the Russians, if you don't come to the table and come up with a peace deal, and tell the Ukrainians, by the way, you're going to give up some territory. We're sorry, but you are at this point. Tell the Russians, if you don't come to the table and get a peace deal, we're giving the Ukrainians every single weapon they want and telling them to use them. Why? Because this war has been extremely costly for the Russians. They've lost an inordinate number of men. They're pulling people out of prison now and shipping them off to Ukraine and telling them, if you don't die, you'll get free. They've got a situation now with the North Koreans. The North Koreans have had to come in and help the Russians. And ironically, I thought it was a joke. It's really not. The Ukrainians have been airdropping phones for the North Koreans already loaded with pornographic websites. They've never seen porn before, and they are highly addicted. They don't want to go back to North Korea anymore either. Seb Gorka was doing an interview with the Times, the British Times. This is him. This is grown-up foreign policy in action.
I'll give one tip away that the president has mentioned. He will say to that murderous former KGB colonel, that thug who runs the Russian Federation, you will negotiate now, or the aid that we have given to Ukraine thus far will look like peanuts. That's how he will force those gentlemen to come to an arrangement that stops the bloodshed.
He will tell that thug who runs Russia, so that's a Trump advisor, Seb Gorka is going to be the counterterrorism advisor, calling Vladimir Putin a thug. I thought this was the most pro-Putin regime ever. It's got Seb Gorka calling him a thug. He is, by the way, a thug. And saying Trump's going to tell Russia, if you don't come to the table for a peace plan, what we've given to Ukraine right now is going to be peanuts compared to what we're giving them. That's a grown-up foreign policy. That is a grown-up, real foreign policy. It is the sort of foreign policy that actually needs to be implemented, actually needs to be done. Now, what's so interesting here is the actual people who are pro-Russia, the Putin supporters out there, they're horrified by what Gorka said. They are absolutely horrified. But I'm sorry, America first doesn't mean Russia first. In fact, for America to be first, Russia cannot be first. For America to be first, Ukraine needs to be free. Because if Russia is allowed to expand in Ukraine, Russia is going to go from expanding in Ukraine to spreading throughout Europe. They're already trying. There are more and more warning signs. NATO is telling businesses in Europe, you need to be prepared for a war footing. You need to find out what that means. Why? They're deeply concerned with the North Koreans and the Iranians helping the Russians, let alone the Chinese. Here's the thing, and it's an unpleasant truth, but it's true. There are bad people in the world, and we're not going to get rid of the bad people. But if we can get bad people on our side instead of China's side, we're going to be better off. That's America first. You may not like to think of this way, but frankly, there are dictators in the world who are murderous, monstrous dictators. They will either be our friend or they will be China's friend. And they're more likely to be China's friend because they know if they do business with the United States under Joe Biden, like with Jimmy Carter, they're going to have to worry about human rights abuses. Well, the only reason that they can maintain power is because of their human rights abuses. If we become their friend and we say, look, it's not in our face, we just don't want you working with China, we want to have trade relations with you, well, I'm fine with that. We're not going to get these countries to conform to our values. The question is, do we want them to be on China's side or our side? And there are people like, oh, this is so distasteful. This is so bad. I can't believe you would say that. Yes. You know what? I would rather Pinochet be in South Africa or South America than the Chinese setting up shop. I would much rather an Augusto Pinochet than a communist running parts of South America. Pinochet was ruthless to the communists. You're not allowed to praise Pinochet. Pinochet was a great leader and stabilized a country and brought in free market capitalism. And to this day, it's one of the more prosperous countries in South America, but he threw the communists out of helicopters into the Pacific. You're not even allowed to make jokes about throwing commies out of helicopters. I made that joke once and was vilified and got thrown off Meet the Press. Still, I thought it was kind of funny. He literally would round up the communists, fly them out into the Pacific, and shove them out the door. He was not a good man, but he was on our side. And I would rather a Pinochet on our side than a Nicolas Maduro or a Hugo Chavez or whoever the hell the leader is in Cuba these days. In the Cold War, Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush understood. Sometimes you have to make deals with bad guys. And sometimes you have to be so willing to ruthlessly prop up your allies that the bad guys know they can't mess with the allies or they're going to be ruined. It's a grown-up foreign policy to say we're actually going to give Ukraine every weapon system they want. What Joe Biden has given them is going to look like peanuts compared to what we're going to give them. That's a grown-up foreign policy. It's what we need in this country. We are weaker today than we've ever been because we've had Barack Obama and Joe Biden defund the military, gut the military, and undermine our strong, robust foreign policy with these pipe dream fantasies that somehow we can just sit back and the rest of the world's going to get along. You know what the rest of the world has done while the United States has chosen not to lead? The rest of the world has slipped into further tyranny, and they've turned against us. I am encouraged by this team of the White House. And by the way, you should know, Mike Waltz, the incoming national security advisor to Donald Trump, leaving Congress, congressman from Florida, he says he's been talking to Jake Sullivan and that American adversaries need to understand that this administration and the coming administration are largely on the same page when it comes to who our adversaries are and the extent to which we need to stop them. In fact, I am very reliably told that the current administration is blessing the current actions of the incoming administration when it comes to reaching out to foreign leaders and preparing for action in Europe. Not for a war expansion, but for a massive increase in armament for Ukraine as a way to force the Russians to have peace. Donald Trump's idea, very frankly, is this. If Russia doesn't stop the war in Ukraine, many more Russians are going to die because we will arm Ukraine to the teeth. It's exactly a grown-up foreign policy that we need, and it is in stark contrast to Joe Biden, who has said all those things, but done none of those things. Actions matter, and Trump's prepared to act, and that's a good thing. I was on Leland Vittert's program last night on News Nation. Great show, good news network. I've enjoyed him. You know, Bill Shine from Fox, who was Roger Ailes' right-hand man, he left after Roger left. He has moved over to helping the folks at News Nation. He's also helped the folks at Old Glory Bank, by the way. It's just Bill is a salt-of-the-earth guy. And News Nation has done a very good job gaining some traction. It still doesn't have a ton of viewers compared to the other networks, but it's growing. Month over month, it's growing. And what they've done, and I very much appreciate, is that they typically don't have a bunch of panelists yelling at each other. What they do and what the staff is very obligated to do is to have on, for example, the conservative and push and probe on the conservative's arguments, and then have on the liberal and do the same thing. And a very good journalist, regardless of their biases, is able to be devil's advocate to both sides. And that's I enjoy my exchanges with Leland because he forces me onto my A game and I him. And last night we were talking about the Trump picks, and he was like, listen, Trump's not a conservative. He's a populist. This is arguably the most liberal cabinet a Republican's ever had. Shouldn't he be given the benefit of the doubt? And my point was, yeah, giving the benefit of the doubt. He clearly has a level of mandate of support in this country, but also as a conservative, I feel like I've got an obligation to warn some of your picks may undermine you. At the end of the day, there is not a person on planet Earth except one of those deeply committed partisans who wants to talk politics at Thanksgiving who really cares about the cabinet picks. Donald Trump is going to get the blame and Donald Trump is going to get the credit, not a cabinet pick. At the same time, The cabinet picks, I don't think most people understand, have unique powers given by Congress to the cabinet picks that the president himself does not automatically have. So the cabinet picks are where the power is. For example, it was the labor secretary who shut down businesses across the country during COVID. It was the labor secretary who mandated COVID vaccines for companies that did business with the government. It was the labor secretary who did these things. It was the education secretary who paused student loans. It was the housing and urban development secretary who paused evictions. So these people do matter. And when you have Chavez DeRimmer and labor secretary who the left loves, who's being praised by the left, who has the votes of the Democrats in the Senate, you should be a little concerned with that person. When you have Robert Kennedy Jr., who's never met a conspiracy he didn't want to embrace, you should be concerned with a nut like Kennedy in charge of something. The man literally believes chemtrails are a thing. At the same time, as Leland and I discussed last night, one of the things that Donald Trump does, one of the things anyone who knows Donald Trump says he does, and one of the things that he clearly is doing, is he's putting a bunch of people together who are going to clash. Trump likes it. By design, Donald Trump wants to have people put together who disagree, and he can be the decider in chief. And the thing that horrifies the left, quite frankly, the thing that really, really has the left furious is that they want the bureaucracy to decide. They want the bureaucracy in charge, not the president. This is why, by the way, the left is furious with Donald Trump being president and horrified and scared, and people are fleeing the country because they don't want Donald Trump to have that power. But they don't want to strip the power from the presidency because they know there's no such thing as permanence, and they want the power back, and they want the bureaucracy to have the power. The left has decided not to have a socialist revolution in this country, but a technocratic revolution. A lot of people think we've headed towards socialism. We haven't. We've headed towards technocracy. In fact, I forget the philosopher from the 1970s who was writing about this, that the step to go for a republic like the United States after democracy was not socialism or communism, but to endow the bureaucracy with the technical expertise to make the decisions for everyone else to become like Plato's Republic. That's where we've headed. And that's why the left is upset with Trump being in charge. It's why you have a guy like Ben Rhodes on MSNBC saying that Donald Trump wants to turn the government into an ideological enterprise. Ben Rhodes wants to turn the government into an ideological enterprise. It's just progressives don't believe they have ideology. Progressives believe they're just implementing common sense reforms. The bottom line is this. If you're really concerned about the size and scope of the government, that it has gotten too powerful, that the government of the United States has burdened people too much, you should want less government. You should want less power in Washington. You should want a less powerful bureaucracy. You should want to rein it all in. My buddy Grover Norquist says all the time he wants a government so small it can be drowned in a bathtub. I'm with him. Maybe drowned in a teacup full of water. I don't think we'll ever get a government that small. I'm not delusional. I don't think it's going to happen. It's what I would want. But the left wants an expansionist government. They just don't want the Republicans in charge of it. And they're willing to wait out the Republicans because they understand something a lot of people on our side have forgotten. They understand that as an ideological enterprise, no matter how populist Donald Trump is as opposed to conservative, he's never going to use the government as robustly as the progressives for progressive ends. Because Donald Trump doesn't want progressive ends. Donald Trump doesn't want boys and girls sports. That's a progressive end. Donald Trump does not want socialism. That's a progressive end. And until the populists aligned with Donald Trump understand that the only way to stop the progressives from using the government for their ends is to gut the government, not to weaponize it in our favor, not to pick the winners and losers for 4 years and let the Democrats do it. Well, you got to gut it. You got to gut it. You got to get rid of it. It's one of the things I like about Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's based on the name comes from Dogecoin, the meme coin that Elon Musk backed on Twitter, and it skyrocketed, one of those cryptocurrencies. Mara Gay is a writer at the New York Times. She's on MSNBC. Notice it's all MSNBC. On MSNBC, they tell you what you want to hear if you're on the left. They want to scare you about Donald Trump. And she's talking about how bad this committee is from Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to cut government.
Well, it's not the same thing. And I actually think the Congresswoman brought up a really interesting point in terms of how this Doge or Dodge, I don't know what we've gone with, might function separately, which is essentially not only is it just loyal to Donald Trump, but it's creating government bureaucracy for the express purpose of punishing political enemies potentially and also rewarding political friends. So what kind of contract authority is it going to have? What kind of transparency is it going to have? I mean, yes, people get frustrated with government, but there are actually very strict reporting rules, especially in Congress. These congressional panels have to actually report to the public what they are doing with public money, what agencies are doing. So what kind of reporting requirements are is Elon Musk and this Doge going to have? We don't actually know, but I think part of the concern is that when you create an entity, you can create your own rules. And that's really ultimately what's happening here, is that Donald Trump is kind of allowing some cronies to use government to their own ends. And I think the American people deserve to know what that's going to look like.
The Democrats do this with unions all the time, and they're never upset about it. They're just upset when Republicans learn from them and duplicate it. So Donald Trump has this very diverse, populist group of people. He's got Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe in charge of the CIA. They disagree on a lot of policy issues. We've got Marco Rubio, who aligns with John Ratcliffe against Tulsi Gabbard. Got Seb Gorka, and that's just for national security and foreign policy. You got Pete Hegseth in for Department of Defense. These are a group of people who are going to bitterly disagree on the future. And Donald Trump is going to listen to the arguments and make his mind up. The former Prime Minister of Australia has a piece in foreign policy. Malcolm Turnbull. He was a great conservative leader in Australia, had a great relationship with Donald Trump. Trump intended to put tariffs on Australian steel and aluminum. In a piece in Foreign Affairs, not foreign policy, in Foreign Affairs, Malcolm Turnbull talks about how he convinced Donald Trump not to put tariffs on Australia. You know his selling point? Australia exported, this is him writing, a modest quantity of steel to the west coast of the United States because shipping, pay attention to this, the cost of shipping steel, almost all of it for roofing, across the Pacific from Australia to California was less than half the cost of shipping it to California from steel makers in the Midwest and the East Coast. You got that? It was cheaper, it is to this day cheaper, to ship steel all the way from Australia to California than it is to put it on a railroad and get it from the Midwest and East Coast to California. So if Donald Trump were to put a tariff on Australian steel, it would increase steel costs on the West Coast by 25%, and that would still be cheaper than getting the steel from the Midwest and the East Coast. Malcolm Turnbull used logic. He knows Trump's a businessman. He made the business case. And the result was that Australia did not get tariffs put on it. He also said, by the way, he said this, let me read you this. Second, I said that if Trump's argument for tariffs was to correct trade policy with other countries that were not fair or reciprocal, why would he impose them on Australia? Australia and the United States have maintained a free trade agreement for years. The United States enjoys a large trade surplus with Australia. No tariffs and no quotas, I said to him. In fact, it can't get any better. And you've got a $25 billion trade surplus in favor of the United States. Truth be told, you got the best trade deal ever with Australia compared to anywhere else. He made a logical case, and Trump listened. The idea from people, if you listen to MSNBC, is that Trump is some sort of irrational creature. He's not irrational. He's not irrational. You make the case to him, he understands. So Trump's putting this team of rivals together who are going to fight it out in front of him, and he's going to be the decider in chief. The left doesn't want Trump to be the decider in chief. They want the bureaucracy to decide, and the left has been embedding within the bureaucracy for decades, so the bureaucracy always reliably makes a decision that benefits the left. By gutting the bureaucracy, Trump is eliminating the power of the left. By gutting the government, Trump is eliminating the power of the left. The government needs to be gutted because Donald Trump will only be president for 4 years. Maybe J.D. Vance gets in, but can you take the chance? Wouldn't you rather the government not be able to wield power against you or me or anyone else? And that would infuriate the left because the left needs the power of government to advance their agenda because their agenda is deeply unpopular with the American public. So you gut the government's ability to expand their agenda. The left itself is neutralized in this country. If you're playing to beat the left, not just to own them, but to beat them, you need to reduce the size, scope, and power of the United States government. And unfortunately, I don't know that the next 4 years are where we're going to see that happen.